Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. I'm here with a reader question, and it's about what she calls part-time empaths, if it's possible to be a part-time empath. So let's dive into the question. I'm going to read it out to you, and then I'll dive into the answer here. Okay, hello. I'd love to hear your thoughts as to whether real empaths tend to feel people's emotions almost all the time. I realize that sounds like a stupid question. It's not a competition, and by everyone, I don't mean literally everyone because that would be silly. I'm asking because I've had two occasions when the depression of a person near me hit me like a punch in the face. I actually curled up and cried for hours the first time. It was such a bizarre experience that made me research high sensitivity. The second time it happened, the feeling was so powerful that I moved away. The depression went away. I moved closer. It came back. So that seemed like reasonable proof that it's actually possible to feel someone else's emotions in your own body, even though they keep insisting that they're fine. Except, I haven't really had that experience since. I definitely take on the mannerisms of whoever is in the room. It drives my husband mental. And I relate to most other traits you've written about. But if you were to ask me if I always know how the other person next to me in the bus queue is feeling, my honest answer would be that I have absolutely no idea. I'm fine with the possibility that I have no empathic tendencies at all, but the not knowing bugs me. There is so much out there about how empaths are special, delicate flower children who soak up the pain of the entire world, and I don't relate to all that stuff. Most of the time, I'm just doing the shopping or being grumpy with my kids or whatever. I'm not especially quiet or sweet. So I'd love to read a post about whether it's possible to be a sort of bargain bin empath with only intermittent abilities to pick up on stuff, or a lapsed empath. And then I ask, when somebody asks me a question, I have a little form and I ask, what suggestions have you already tried, or what have you already received? What suggestions have you already received on this topic, and why isn't that helpful? And she says, I can't find much. Everything I've read suggests that empaths walk around in a very intense 24-hour whirlwind of other people's feelings. I'd say when it does happen to me, it seems pretty unmistakable, but it doesn't happen very often, or at least not with anything like the same intensity. So maybe what I'm experiencing is not empath stuff. Okay, so let's dive in here. So first of all, there's a few distinctions we need to make here that typically are not made when it comes to talking about empaths, okay? Typically, when people talk about empaths online, everyone who feels a lot, they're just like, oh, you're an empath. An empath, though, technically is actually someone who feels and absorbs. Now, what this person is sharing, and I'm not gonna reveal her name, what this person is sharing is that, there's been two occasions where she could feel what somebody else was going through, but only when she was close to the person, and then when she moved away, she didn't feel it anymore, okay? So the thing is, if when you move away, you no longer feel it, you're not absorbing it. You're feeling it when you're close to someone, so there's a kind of physical proximity effect in the sense that you can sense it when you're close enough to the person, but then when you move away, it doesn't really stick to you. It doesn't really stay with you. It just evaporates, it doesn't evaporate, but it feels like it evaporates because it doesn't actually get into your system. Okay, so this is the first thing that I talk about with people if they have something like this going on, is trying to make distinctions between what kind of sensitivity do you have to these feelings and how is it actually working for you. So this is one important distinction is, if you're close to someone and you feel what they're feeling, when you leave the room, is that sensation still with you? And if it is, that is not proof of being an empath because there could be more going on. But at the very least, when you leave the room and the feeling is gone, and that's kind of the pattern with it for you, it means you're not absorbing it, okay? That's actually good news because it means there's a lot of problems you don't have. Okay, second question she's asking about this is not only am I an empath, but is it possible to be kind of a part-time, sometimes yes, sometimes no empath? And so in her case, from the two things she shared, I don't think it's empath. It sounds more like clairsentience, but I would have to talk to her and find out more. But the second thing is, even if you have empath tendencies or you have clairsentience or any of those related things where you pick up on a lot from other people is it's always selective. Your abilities are always selective, okay? They're never absorbing and feeling and taking on what everyone else around you is feeling. And she alludes to that. She understands that. But I think what isn't discussed much is that there are people who feel a lot of things from a lot of people, and there are also people who only feel things from time to time. So only under very specific circumstances do they feel something from someone. This is just your inner programming around this. This is how your senses have been trained around what they need to be extra observant of. And some people grow up and they have learned through life, through experience, that it's better if they pick up on a lot of things from a lot of people. And other people have grown up in a way where it was very, very specific. It's like only this specific situation you need to be extra aware of, and everything else you can ignore, right? And so your system gets conditioned, your senses get conditioned, your psychic senses get conditioned to pick up on specific things. So this is why every empath and every clairsentient person is very different. Some of us are extremely overwhelmed by things, before you learn how to change that conditioning. And others are mostly fine. And it's just every once in a while, there's like this intensity of something or someone. And they're like, wow, that was really big and obvious. And that's it, okay? So that is absolutely normal, okay? So this experience of like it happens sometimes is absolutely normal. What I do want to say is that in my own journey, I had similar experiences initially where I noticed that one thing I still remember was at a party where I noticed somebody sat down next to me, and I don't even remember if it was a boy or a girl. It doesn't matter. A person sat down next to me, and I just got this really, really intense gut pain all of a sudden. Like I didn't feel well, and I was like, "That's weird," because I didn't have any issues before. So I was like, "What's that about?" And then the person moved, or I moved, and suddenly the feeling was gone. That was my one of the first real little things, little ahas for me. Like, wait, there's something more going on. This is not just me. And what I later found out about myself is that I was picking up on a lot of things from a lot of people all the time. It's just, it wasn't registering with me. It wasn't very obvious. It wasn't very loud. It was quite subtle. And it was a lot, but it was subtle and I was not trained to recognize it. So this is the other part to this question. So just because this is what you notice right now doesn't mean that's all there is to say about this for you. It might be, but it might be that there's a lot going on beneath the surface that you're not aware of, and that will be worth looking into. So yeah, short answer, definitely like basically every empath and every clairsentient person is going to be sensitive to some things and also not sensitive to a lot of other things. I've had clients who would share, for example, that they were totally fine around old, somewhat maybe depressed people that didn't get to them, but then they'd be really, really uncomfortable around angry people, something like that. Or they could deal very well with, again, like any particular kind of situation where other people might find they get really overwhelmed and upset. They were fine with that. So this is very, very individual. So when I work with clients on this, when I work with empath clients or also with clairsentient clients, we really it's a very personal process to figure out what are your personal patterns around this? What exactly are you picking up on? What are you picking up on and why? And how can we let this go? Because ultimately, these patterns have a reason for being, but for most of us, it doesn't really serve you in the world when there are so many people around and so many people you could start picking things up from. And so my understanding of empath is not that we're delicate, special flower people who are here to save the planet. My understanding is it's a kind of codependent conditioning, really, where we just take way too much responsibility, and that's kind of been hammered into us through life. And as a result, we do this automatically and we don't know any different, but you can learn to identify what exactly you're doing and learn a process I teach to let this go. And this is something I do with people one-on-one in my From Suffering Sponge to Sensitive Savant program. Because sometimes I have people ask me like, what's the trick or what's the little thing? Like I can explain it in 5 minutes. This is not a 5-minute process. And it's, like I said, it's very individual. So I would explain it to you differently than I would explain it to someone else. The basics are the same, but I really tweak it for every single person so that it works for them. Yeah, so I would say if you notice that there are two specific, these two specific events where you notice like, wow, I really was feeling something, it doesn't mean that's all there is to the story. You might be feeling a lot of things from a lot of people and not realize, or you may be dissociating it from it. You may be pushing it away. And lastly, there are other ways that you might be picking up on energy from people. Empaths and clairsentients are very, I am here, I'm grounded in my body, and even though I'm present and I'm here, I'm still feeling stuff from people. But there's also ways, and this is actually way more common, and I think this is also why there is that story out there that people are picking up on everything from everyone all the time, because when people are not grounded and they're not present in their body and they're dissociating all the time, then what happens is and I know this sounds weird, but it's like they leave their body. Like, yes, biologically, of course, they're in their body, but with their awareness and their focus and their energy, they're not in their body. And they're just in this big energy soup of the planet. And that's where there's a lot of things going on and there's a lot to feel. Normally, you're shielded from that just by being in your body, right? Most people are shielded from all these energies out there just by being in their body. The exceptions are the empaths and the clairsentient people who have this bigger sensitivity wired into them, okay? But most people, and most people who are talking about empaths on the internet right now, are just very ungrounded, very floaty people who are constantly floating around and floating in other people's spaces. So if you end up feeling something from someone, sometimes it could be that you're just kind of programmed very specifically to only pick up from things from very specific situations, very specific people. Could also be that there's way more going on that you don't realize yet, that you don't feel yet, that you've kind of pushed away, you've kind of disconnected from it, you've just kind of gotten used to it, like it's this backward hum that you just, you drown it out. You're like, it's like if you grow up living next to the freeway and there's always this noise, you don't hear it anymore at some point. So empath and clairsentient overload can be like that. It can be like this background hum that you've learned to tune out, but it's still there, it's still affecting you. But the other thing that can happen is that in those specific instances, you, for whatever reason, something freaked you out, something scared you, or you arrived in a very ungrounded way, you were just kind of spaced out that day. Also happens when people are on drugs, by the way. That's another way, like common way to space out, right? That then suddenly you're feeling stuff that you don't normally feel. So I just want to throw that out there. It's not that I don't have a hunch, all right, about the person asking this question. I'm just answering this in a very general way and kind of exploring all the options, because that is one of the reasons that people are so precious about it. There's a lot of covering up of unhealthy dissociating and then calling it a spiritual gift that's happening right now. It's very strange in the way that it's happening. And in another sense, it's not strange because it sounds way more special than saying, oh, I have trouble like staying in my body and I have trouble being grounded and I have trouble being here, But the thing is with dissociating and leaving your body, for anyone who's highly sensitive, which is not the same as empath or clairsentience, by the way, about 1 in 5 people is highly sensitive, and true empath abilities and clairsentience are way, 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 way lower than that, way, way less than that. But anyone who's highly sensitive is going to dissociate and kind of leave their body more easily, more quickly. It's very easy for highly sensitive people to connect with, the divine and to connect with inspiration and to kind of forget about like the earthly, mundane, material aspects of life. We're just kind of wired in a way where it's easier for us to do that. So all highly sensitive people have to practice being grounded, have to work at being grounded. It's something we have to kind of work a little bit harder at than most other people do. And as a result of that, there are a lot of highly sensitive people who dissociate a lot, who are ungrounded, who are not living in their bodies with their awareness and their attention. It's always out there, right? And it could be because it's out there because you want to know what's going on with everyone, or you're worried about what people are doing or what they're thinking, or you just want to be one step ahead, but the focus is out there and not in your body. And then that can happen that you can pick up on a lot of things. So yeah, it is possible that, let's say, for example, that I meet a very, very scary person and I just go like, whoa, that person is creepy and scary. And I just kind of get a really, really big fright and like, and I just feel really uncomfortable. And I end up being so scared that I leave my body, that I don't want to be here. This is too scary. And then suddenly I can feel all this stuff from this person because I'm not grounded, right? Like for me, that's something that happens to me and that I can do anyway because I have this empath ability and I have this clairsentience ability. The way I look at that, clairsentience is basically the basics of empath, and an empath is like a layer on top of it, but that's a whole other discussion. But there would be ways for anyone to feel stuff from other people by dissociating from their body, and this is actually something that some spiritual teachers teach, which I think is incredibly unhealthy. And that's a whole other story why it's so unhealthy, but you need to be in your body. Being in your body is part of what keeps you healthy. If you're floating around or you're not paying attention to what's going on here, that is not good. But a lot of people think it's really cool and they think it's very spiritual. And like I said, it can also happen because you get very frightened and you feel very uncomfortable and stressed out. And then suddenly, boop, you're out. And then suddenly you feel this stuff from people. So these are all these different reasons why it can, you can feel stuff from other people. And it's not all empath. And there's a lot of different varieties and there's a lot of different combos. And this is why also I prefer to talk to people about this one-on-one and really explore this with them. And there's a few ways we can do that. One is a conversation and just really get into the nitty-gritty of what do you realize already? What have you noticed? What have you observed? And the other thing is I can do a long-distance healing where I can actually check if you're holding on to energy from others. This is a really clear way to figure out if you're an empath, by the way. Clairsentience is a little bit harder because if someone's clairsentient, they don't absorb, they don't hold on to the energy. So there's nothing really I can see, right? So it's not actually that I see it, but that's how we talk about this stuff, right? It's all seeing. No, it's actually feeling. I use a method where I feel and I test stuff. But when someone is an empath, they literally absorb energy from other people. And I mean burdensome, painful emotions, not the good stuff. They absorb that and they're holding it in their energy field. And so when I do a healing, I can identify that and say like, whoa, there's a lot of anger here. Is it theirs or is it from someone else? Oh, it's from someone else. When I find that, I know someone's an empath. Okay, so there's a way that I can check that. Clairsentience is harder because, there's nothing to find. There's nothing to find after the fact. So it's basically based on just listening to someone very carefully, figuring things out with them. And then of course, if I do healing work with someone, we can find the patterns that are dictating that they have to feel a lot of stuff from people for whatever reason. So there are ways to kind of fine tune that and narrow that down. And the other thing I can measure is how grounded someone is. So if somebody comes to me and they say, I'm definitely an empath, but I can tell that they're very ungrounded and they're only in their body 10% or 20% of the time, I know that the first thing we need to work on, regardless of whether they're an empath or not as well, maybe, is they need to get into their body. And I say like 95% of the people, when they get into their body, all that awareness of other people's feelings, like feeling it, goes away because they're just in their own body and they have their natural boundaries. So summing it up, this is my long answer to this question, but it's important because it simplifies so much online. It's like, you're an empath, you're like this beautiful rainbow person, yay you, and that's kind of it. And it's way, way, way more subtle and sophisticated than that. And I've been looking into this for about 10 years now. And when I started out, I didn't know about the many distinctions that I do now. It's just kind of working with people, and then finding out, wait a minute, this person sounds like they're an empath, but when I'm working with them and when I do a healing work with them, we're not finding what I would expect, right? And just kind of fine-tuning and specifying from there. And that's kind of how this work developed for me. I just started out with the common sense idea of what empaths are, which a lot of that is out there, right? Kind of simplistic. And then I knew what I was like. And then I had some clients who were like me, but I also had clients who were okay, we just had a battery change. All right, so there's a lot more to say about this. I would recommend, if you have this going on, you set up a clarity call with me so we can start working this out in person. You're gonna get way more answers than just trying to endlessly read articles or listen, like see videos or whatever. Like watch videos, sorry. I've been speaking a lot of Dutch this week, so now my English is a little bit worse than usual. So yeah, but I have, if you're kind of nervous about having a conversation, or you're like, not gonna do that, I have a lot of information in the Happy Sensitive library. This is my huge archive of podcasts and explanations and live class recordings and everything that I create that is not for free. I put it in there. And I have a whole series on all these differences, and it's called The Language of Energy Sensitivity. I also go into detail about a lot of different energy differences and just a lot of stuff for highly sensitive people and empath and clairsentient people in general. So if this is something that you'd like to learn more about initially and just kind of get your fundamentals, there's a lot in the Happy Sensitive library that you'll find interesting. All right. I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.